70 years after the introduction of the Telecaster, you may think that everything has been already said. Yet, with more than 30 years of addiction to vintage teles, I'm convinced that certain aspects of the Telecaster tone still need to be clarified. In particular, I believe that the abuse of the term twang in relation to the Telecaster generated some confusion, misconceptions, or false myths. In Germany, I could examine a superb vintage original Fender Telecaster from 1960. It's the perfect tool to shed some light on some lesser known and celebrated aspects of the Telecaster's tone. I must admit that the title of this episode may sound a bit sensationalistic and provocative. Debunking the myth of twang, secrets of a vintage 1959-1960 Fender Telecaster. Scotch whisky is a registered trademark. This means that I cannot produce whisky in my backyard and call it Scotch. This name can only be used for whisky made in Scotland in accordance with certain requirements. For this reason, in Italy, the best wines carry on the label the acronym DOC, which stands for Denomination of Controlled and Guaranteed Origin, meaning that the product's name is certified as made in its typical region. Leo Fender's genius conceived a design involving a simple construction technique. Consequently, many folks think that if they put together two pieces of wood, they can make a guitar and call it a Telecaster. The term twangy is brought up as a DOC certification of any given guitar with a Telecaster shape. In fact, when describing the authentic and pure tone of a Telecaster, the onomatopoeic word twang is most commonly used. If it twangs, then it's a Telecaster. In my opinion, defining a vintage DOC Telecaster as a twang machine, as most people do, is not wrong, but can be simplistic or reductive. My teacher in high school used to say, if you define humans as beings with two legs, that would mean that the chickens are humans. We are just about to reveal another side of the pure Telecaster tone. First of all, we need to agree on what the word twang means. Describing a sound with a word is not easy, since we all perceive and evaluate sounds in our own unique way. Nevertheless, twang commonly refers to the tone of Telecaster players of the Nashville Country School. How do they get that tone? My affectionate audience already knows the character Pierino, the guy who comes with direct, ingenious questions or assertions. I can hear Pierino saying, "Tone is in your fingers." Of course it is, and those players definitely developed a specific picking technique. Nonetheless, every guitar tone comes from a concoction of factors, in which more aspects concur. Twang is no exception. Its ingredients are design and materials of the guitar, strings, hardware, electronics, and yes, also picking technique. All these factors account more or less to the typical snap of this sharp tone, with crisp attack and strong high frequencies. Some of these ingredients are inherent to the Telecaster, or at least can be easily achieved with a good Telecaster type guitar. But the twang is not exclusive to the Telecaster. Just think of the inimitable twang of Danelectro guitars, or the twang of Fender Jaguar, so indicated for surf music, or the twang of a Gretsch with Danasonic pickups. Mark Knopfler, Hank Marvin, Richard Thompson, and Eric Johnson, for example, got excellent twangy tones from a Stratocaster. Does the twangy tone have a downside or trade-off? Which is the other side of the coin? Some country players push twang to the extreme, some others just don't.
Sounded a little more musical to me, a little less twangy and a little more throaty.
When working on the last episode, I came across this interview where country guitarist Brad Paisley says that he likes a more throaty sound as opposed to extreme twang. I prefer the word beefy. Many of you could teach me that Jimmy Page, in the first album of the Led Zeppelin, uses his former legendary 1959 Dragon Telecaster. All fans agree that this is one of the greatest guitar tones, but I never heard anybody indicating this album as an example of twang. This is why Jimmy Page, like Keith Richards, is definitely on the other side of the coin. With your Telecaster set for twang, you can get clean tones that sound absolutely great in a certain context, country and rockabilly in the first place. On the other hand, if you boost your gain to get a more distorted sound, chances are that your tune will sound harsh and lack expressiveness. As you back off from the twangy zone, you'll get into a more musical territory, as Brad Paisley says. You'll sound more beefy, as your tone will gain fat, depth, compression, and sustain. How could Jimmy Page get that tone out of a Telecaster? Of course, Pierino. Page has an incomparable playing technique and finger's touch, but also his Telecaster had some particular features. My friend Marco asked me advice to buy a good old vintage Tele, and I suggested to go for this astounding March 1960 blonde in excellent conditions, and even with its original Brontolex case, hang tag and ashtray bridge cover. It has penciled neck date and serial number on the bottom side of the neck plate, as seen on quite a few Fenders from that period. Marco kindly invited me to visit him in Germany, giving me the chance to test and show you his guitar. This incredible instrument recently passed to the friends, collectors and dealers of rockandvintage.it. Check their website if you are interested. This Telecaster is in many ways similar to Jimmy Page's Dragon Telecaster, short of flashy psychedelic hand paintings. As we've seen in BTR number 7, by mid-1959, Fender changed the neck construction technique. They switched from necks made with one piece of solid maple, where the neck itself was fretted, to maple necks with separate fretboard made with rosewood. This restyling process started with the Jazzmaster in 1958 and was probably due to the effort to keep up with the elegance of a Gibson neck. Dirty maple necks didn't look good on TV. Brazilian rosewood is now considered, with good reason, a rare and valuable wood. At the time it was still available in big supplies, so that is what Fender and other American manufacturers used consistently until 1964. These early rosewood fingerboards were thick slabs with a flat bottom glued upon the neck. The surface of the maple neck base was also planed or milled flat. The top surface of the rosewood was shaped to the right radius. This construction technique, known as slab fingerboard, remained in use on Telecaster and Stratocaster until July 1962. Fender then opted for the so-called curved construction, where the maple neck base was given a convex radius and a thinner rosewood fretboard was applied on top, so it had uniform thickness all across. The reason of the switch to the curved fingerboard is that the flat joint between the slab fingerboard base and the maple neck revealed to be unstable, tending to separate under the pressure from the truss rod, especially when the glues of the time were exposed to high temperatures. That didn't happen quite often, but a friend of mine has a 1962 slab Stratocaster with the fingerboard roughly fixed with 2 nails. The curved neck proved to have a stable joint, resistant to the stress of truss rod adjustments. Also, as the price of rosewood increased, this revealed to be a cost-cutting measure, which didn't hurt. In fact, rosewood fingerboards from mid-1963 were streamlined and reduced to thin veneers. The Fender guitars with original slab necks produced between mid-1959 and July 1962 have a distinctive tone. The thick Brazilian rosewood fingerboard accounts to a fatter sound with more sustained, slightly more aggressive temperament, great dynamics and touch sensitivity. In fact, Jimmy Page could effortlessly migrate from his Dragon Telecaster to the Cherry Sunburst Les Paul. Those guitars were more similar than many people may think. Another special feature was introduced on the Telecaster in mid-1958, the top-loading system to anchor strings, as opposed to the usual string-through ferrules, with strings anchored through the body. Jimmy Page's Dragon had this top-loading bridge type. The top-loading method was not successful and was soon discontinued, but guess what? Fender didn't throw anything away. Leftover top-loading bridges were used on Telecasters and Esquires throughout the slab neck era, even if they have the traditional string-through ferrules. This Telecaster is one of those. It has both ferrules and top-loading bridge. How did the top-loading affect the tone? My friend Marco had the brilliant idea to do a comparison test. We did a demonstration with the kind collaboration, assistance and hospitality of my other guitar friend, Marco Gerber. The difference is subtle, but it's definitely there. I hope it comes through the recording. The top-loading system is another factor that tends to collocate the Dragon Telecaster on the opposite side of twang. The attack with top-loader bridge is smoother, while with strings-through ferrules you get a twangier tone with more piercing and powerful attack. From this perspective, if we want to push really far, the ultimate perversion could be anchoring the high strings to the ferrules in the body and the bass strings through the top loader bridge to benefit from the mellower tone and longer sustain. This reminds me the experiments that some players do on the Les Paul with the two-pneumatic bridge. They use to top wrap or overwrap the treble strings only around the stop tailpiece to get more twangy attack on high notes. Another secret that accounts to the huge tone of this guitar is the electronics. It still has the 50s type Cornell Dubilier tone capacitors, sounding warmer and more musical than the later Circle D ceramic disc capacitors from the 1960s. The 50s caps, in addition to the original so-called dark or deep rhythm circuit, make this guitar exceptionally versatile. With this type of wiring, the two pickups never work together. In front position, the neck pickup alone works in parallel with a 0.1 capacitor and no tone control. It is a preset sound indicated for bassy rhythm parts with a nice acoustic feel. In the middle position, the neck pickup alone works with tone control, giving awesome throaty tones. It's like the front position in the modern post-1967 wiring. In the rear position, as you could expect, the bridge pickup alone works with tone control. Closing the tone a bit gives great slide tones. Bottom line, the point of vintage DOC Telecasters, as opposed to parts casters and imitations, is that you can find that magic spot of perfect balance to your taste between crisp twangy tone with loud snappy attack and musical beefy tone with compression, harmonics and sustain. Especially Blackguard Telecasters from the early 1950s or original slab neck Telecasters are capable of going everywhere from sparkling cleans to crunchy or even raging tones. And you don't get there easily without a good DOC Telecaster. How is that possible? Many other aspects still need to be covered, as body and hardware materials, electronics, strings, setup, adjustments. But hey, hopefully we have a long journey together and a lot to talk about. Don't we? If you agree that we still have plenty of time to discuss about that and much more, subscribe to the BTR channel and click the bell to keep in touch. Please remember to leave me your feedback and comments. Feel free to join our Facebook group and visit the BTR Instagram profile.